say thank you to this gallery. Thank you to Abigail, who's done the translations that she'll read part of. Thanks especially to Frédéric. That was magnificent reading with an homage to James Fenimore Cooper, who's one of my favorite American writers. So wonderful to hear that. As Abigail said in her introduction, I've written a book called The Book of a Thousand Eyes. These works that we're going to read tonight are from that book. It is indeed an homage to Scheherazade, and the reason for that is that in the story of the Arabian Nights, or the Thousand Nights and One, the murderous, misogynist, woman-killing Shahryar has been having erotic encounters with women at night, and after the sex, in the morning he has them killed. Scheherazade, as you know, volunteers after most of the women have been killed, and she satisfies his lust as scheduled, but titillates his interest in narrative. And over the course of a series of tales, she re-educates the Shah until at the end of the story, he has become a just, merciful, and benevolent ruler again. If only art could achieve this, we would all be better off. So this is a work of fantasy, all les mots de la nuit, avec des petits contes, des lullabies, des berceuses. Oui, berceuses, oui. Et, oui, comme ça. Here we begin. Stop. Study the human mind. She's gone. I see nothing when she moves the mind from within. She must mean the light to be right. That's not an anthropological view. It's not a hand. Then is this a case of fantasy passing act through impasse? Temptation leaps to the corridors. Chaos keeps to control. Narration rings, story on story. The mechanisms pulling. The events occur in relay. The concluding is displaced and delayed, and the observer asks only that things continue. The observer governs. Don't stop. O voyeur, as stubble on haze, and as déjeuner. She hears a shout, maybe a curse. She closes the window. She feels for the floor. She puts her ear to the window. She puts icing on the cake. She's content to be where she just happens to be found. She sees pigeons in flight, pigeons overcast. And I read about it later. This woman had character. She preserved desire and eliminated repentance. To remember a dream is to realize that one was. I do, as I awake, experience the becoming conscious of something unconscious in the night, to the extent that it's possible to be so, unconscious throughout, and almost speaking as a fortune teller might, with a fortune teller's hindsight. Accurate prophesying solely requires interpreting what has already occurred, since the future, like fortune, is to be found not in events, but in their meanings. The future is fortune's form, but it lacks familiarity, the criterion for belief. But it is real by definition, being unaffected by what we think of it. It is regardless of our sense of metallic clatter, our sense of a glint of lemon yellow, our sense of pressing, horror, pleasure, flight, etc. It is regardless of the future. So the future seems a definite conclusion, but that's not accurate. The future is an accuracy requiring patience, presence. We can't predict if we don't watch. Watching makes what comes to be watched. The future requires requiring. It needs microphone and cold and exaggeration tossing, the sub-zero, foreigners, excess, hum, buckets of dream blue lassitude that only an angel would see as action.
Dit une voix de fille. J'ai été attaquée par des hiboux armés de joujou. J'ai été attaquée par des serpents armés de cure-dents. C'est exactement ce type de langage ridicule que j'entends dans mon sommeil. Un langage banal, mais sans même la prétention qu'a la banalité d'être pertinente et sensée. Je me réveille, irritable et déprimée.
Then this emotion will come to view under two yellow eyes, two dark birds.
Maintenant, tu as dénudé tes bras, tu as raidi ton cou, tu renifles. Tu es allongée, brûlante, dans l'air humide de la nuit, à côté de la fenêtre. En cette 19e nuit, avec la pluie qui tombe et les branches d'un arbre qui collent contre le mur, le crissement des pneus d'un bus en train d'accélérer éclabousse le silence. Tu es soudain éveillée et tu trembles de peur. Lentement, quoique de façon soudaine, tu réalises que toutes ces identifications viennent d'une vie passée. Une vie qui n'était pas affreuse en soi, mais qui est affreuse maintenant parce qu'elle n'est plus. Tu es morte. Tu brûles, non pas d'être vivante, mais d'effroi. Il semble qu'être morte ne t'exclut pas. D'un autre côté, le fait que tu sois morte n'exclut pas non plus que tu sois vivante. Tu sens le tissu d'un bleu inconvenant de la couverture dans la nuit proche, comme un animal contre ton bras au milieu du lit. Tu préfères courir le risque du bord extrême où les draps sont lisses. Tu fais l'expérience de pulsations d'inconscience, spasmes d'oubli suivis de tentatives involontaires pour retrouver mentalement l'équilibre. Moi? Toi? Vivre exige des tentations constantes. Éveillée, l'inconscience demeure, mais comme une empreinte digitale. La vie est un antécédent et une chose inévitable. Mais de quoi?
The boy in the warehouse has changed his name from Frank to Ungoverned Flame. He has numbed his lips to anything less. He weeps for arrows, though he draws up dogs. The boy in the warehouse never goes out. In his lemon tantrums, he calls for everything. There are fixed limits to his safety, and the dogs, gentle diesel communists, guard the stairwells. Dogs. Please amplify and clarify and do not simplify or fortify, because that's our job. We're going out there, mushrooms and spinach, the fire's raging, the child's been murdered, please eat some pudding. Joan lives on Joan Street, her house is yellow. House. I stand at the center of a demonstration on behalf of urban farmers. Dogs. To keep away ants, set the forelegs of your bed in water and don't let the blankets touch the floor. House. The elderly cannot afford to be frivolous. Communists. The people are not comfortable. Ungoverned Flame tunes his siren. There is nothing further then to discuss. Compromise is impossible. The warehouse fills with noise. Communists. All knowledge must be continually exacerbated, lest one feel nothing in response to the word house. House. A truck drives by and then goes up a waterfall. Barges follow upstream, carrying animals, one animal per barge, all headed for the slaughterhouse. Me. My mother and I have just rescued a horse which is now feeling very relaxed, although it has a bandage around its head. We pet it, and its swift, thick, previously belligerent white mane sways gently in the breeze. Horse. There may be some slightly informal significance to this gesture. some social kindness intended. House. People should be encouraged to get up from their wooden chairs and talk to each other. So if you are carrying a beverage tray, hold it high. The boy in the warehouse, ungoverned flame, makes a sketch of the house in his journal of secret postures. There. So it is. There. Just that. In time I've loved. There. No other but one, another. No other. There. Better by day, by night, that too, carrying the body, the flamboyance. Brain. There. A falling equestrian dressed in silk and sailing since. This. There when declared near. Just that. In a moment. Dear. There. No further but an extra. Nothing new. Rare. Recovered once by dark that halls. Again. There. Air. Ropes. Cups. There. A dwindling likeness. Sent and bared. Seafaring since. This. At the merest hint taken, racing ahead to a figure aboard, an annoying foible there, as if to distribute pink or red, equally black, to the rescue, at a rock's pace there. For a figure moving lips, the wrong way, weight tipping, impending, the whole meditation, waiting, there. A straight rein is rare, and doors have suspicions, and I hold that names began histories, and that the last century was a cruel one. I am pretending to be a truck in Mexico. I am a woman with a long neck and a good burden, and I waddle efficiently. Activity never sleeps, and no tale of crumbling cliffs can be a short one. I have to shift weight favorably. Happiness can't be settled. I brush my left knee twice, my right once, my left twice again, and in that way advance. The alphabet and the cello can represent horses, but I can only pretend to be a dog slurping pudding. After the 55 minutes it takes to finish, my legs tremble. All is forgiven. Yesterday is going the way of tomorrow, indirectly, and the heat of the sun is inadequate at this depth. I see the moon. The verbs ought and can lack infinity, and somewhere between 1957, when the heat of the dry sun naughtily struck me, and now when my secrets combine in the new order of cold rains and night winds, a lot has happened. Long phrases are made up of short phrases that bear everything in vain or all in fun, for your sake, and step by step, precisely, I too can spring.
Le changement constant figure le temps que nous sentons passer, ses effets surpassant les choses qu'avons connues, puisque la mémoire de choses nombreuses s'appelle expérience, mais quid de ce que nous appelons l'image de nature, des choses nombreuses que nous appelons, puisque la mémoire, nous l'appelons image de la nature, surpassant les choses qu'avons connues. Le changement constant figure l'expérience qui transmet ses effets, mais quid de ce que le changement constant figure, puisque la mémoire des choses nombreuses s'appelle le temps que nous sentons, s'appelle image de la nature, mais qu'est-ce qui, dans le temps que nous sentons, choses sont pareilles qu'avons connues, qui transmettent son effet, est expérience.
Et encore en anglais, constant change figures the time we sense, passing on its effect, surpassing things we've known before, since memory of many things is called experience. But what we call nature's picture of the many things we call, since memory we call nature's picture, surpassing things we've known before, constant change figures, experience, passing on its effect? But what of what constant change figures, since memory of many things is called the time we sense, called nature's picture? But what of what in the time we sense, surpassing things we've known before, passing on its effect, is experience? Yesterday has arrived and remains under suspicion by the bereft of bereavement, by the adrift of generating distance that makes description of the shore almost impossible, and of the distance, too, shuddering beyond the tents, pitched like heads under hats on the sand, and chattering nonsense that we try to interpret to our continual embarrassment. We are the idiots here, and the tents, and heads, and hats, and sand, and the water too, bobbing and sagging, or nagging finally, as people do who are sick of themselves. But this could all have taken a different course, and maybe it will. Yes, there are more than a usual number of hummingbirds hovering over the morning glory, strangling the fence, and the sun is shining on the pepperwood trees that offer good shade and cover for fish in ripple when one's asleep, a state for which we have a term, imperfectly understood, during which one expresses no discomposure, except perhaps for a slight twitching of the eyelids, compression of the mouth, occasional grinding of the teeth, changes in the depth and rate of inhalation and exhalation, and rarely comprehensible though mumbled speech, proving that insensibility is not a site of calm, and lies on one side a witness to a shooting in a savings bank near a bank of steel, safe deposit boxes sealed, and all much the same, to which waking has no key, as we've no master to cut from, the sky pure and simple, or what we call sky and hope. Everyone does so too. How else could we communicate to each other secrets so precise, intimate, and detailed? Their secrecy lies in its constellation and suffusion that is impossible for words to hide and paint. Scion, cerulean, viridian, alizarin lake, with passing verisimilitude, which it can't contain. That's realism, which is to say, a fleeting realization, when hate, optimism, mourning, and pleasure wake one from one's dreams, in which are hidden one's most dire cliches, one's eyes, one's brain, one's claims, and they don't respond, refuse to answer, even to George, Amelia, Claude, Juan, Janice, or Bob. Though Bob turns back, indeed, he flips, falls, down he goes, and immediately he's up again, arms out. Vengeance is hollow.
Là, dans ta main, une houe d'émeraude. Tu es descendu au sous-sol, tu es venu à la fenêtre, tu as oublié nos noms. Tout le monde a le mal de mer sauf toi, parce que tu ne serres pas les genoux quand tu te tiens sur le pont. Tu suis le mouvement des vagues, tu ondoies. Là, dans ta main, un bâton pour mélanger. Et tu vis dans le pays de nos mères et de nos incarnations, et tu vois les choses qui se changent, les fleurs en destin, les galets en eau, les baies mûres en personnes qui se mettent immédiatement à chasser et à copuler, à préparer de la nourriture et à se disputer. Là, dans ta main, un archet. Tu as plus de 70 ans maintenant, ou peut-être la moitié, ou peut-être 1000 ans. Tu es une étrangère maintenant, ou quelqu'un qui n'est pas encore apparu, mais dont on a la prémonition, et les enfants savent ton nom. Là, dans ta main, un miroir qui reflète un nuage. Tu te déplaces lentement et aussi rapidement. Tu vis dans une grange avec des jambes, tu refuses qu'on te rudoie et tu renverses l'encre. La rumeur s'étend jusqu'aux pigeons, à moins que ce soit les pingouins qui portent le message. Là, dans ta main, un message que nous ne pouvons lire. Tu es silencieuse et parfaite comme un œuf, et lorsqu'il se casse, là, dans ta main, est un carreau, et dessus, il y a nos noms.
There once was a boy, and he had a younger brother who was mournful. The older boy put a silver saddle on his horse one day, and mounting the horse, turned to the younger and said, "Sam, you've won." A thief, hidden behind a tree nearby, overheard this and said to himself, "By tomorrow at this time it will be I who have won." But he was mistaken, as mournfulness cannot be acquired in a day. There was once a poor man who was hungry all the time. "How dare you? How dare you?" he shouted out the window to people hurrying to the shops on the street below. But experience of disappointment cannot be taught, and the people were deaf to his queries, then just as they are now. There was once a sailor who had so many nicknames he no longer remembered what it was he should properly be called. He sat in the dark and gazed at the sea until his eyes ached, and he wondered why the sea, which resembled an eye, never gazed back at him. But heroic efforts often fail, perhaps because emotion is often a poor teacher. There was once a princess who longed to be a cowboy, but by virtue of her sex, she was kept in the house without any shoes. "I'm no more dangerous than a mouse," she said one morning to the miller, who simply pointed to the baited mouse traps with which he protected the flour produced at his mill. Yes, restlessness is a characteristic of human existence, and neither travel nor rapacity can exhaust it. There was once an astronomer who earned his living by promising glory to the king. On weekends, he sat quietly with his daughter doing math. Efficiency, he told her, is best served by contemplation. Now that was an excellent astronomer, and he is admired in pedagogical circles even today as a man who prepared for every lesson in advance. There was once a doctor who had a kind heart and long fingers, and he lived by himself in a room over a bakery. "Everyone likes you plump and warm," the doctor would say to each of his patients, which was just what he heard the baker saying to his muffins as they took them from their tins. And so we see that to a reader in communication with a writer, more and more information is made available. That doctor was a rogue. Moral 1, we are never the worse for our dreams, and a nightmare should not always be taken as a sign of a bad conscience. Moral 2, serenity can be achieved through fussiness, although probably only for the fussy. Moral 3, true justice is never abstract and should therefore not be blindfolded. That's what we can learn from these tales and from other tales too.
Il y a dans mon corps des viscères infernaux dont les flammes brûlent tout ce que je mange. Ô mouche, pénètre ma bouche et va au diable. Ô raisin, roule au bas de ma langue et descend. J'exhale les vapeurs ardentes de tout ce que j'ai consumé.
Ambivalence may be hidden in any act of kindness or every murky show of weakness thrown between giving and getting to the unforgiving, whom one wants to know what one doesn't show in one's dream diminishments of the fullness of life, from which one wakes with neither watch nor shoes, shouting, "I've been robbed of sleep, of which I've had way too little since childhood, which was so long ago it might just as well have taken place in a dream or between dreams, in a gap for which there's no evidence, from 7 to 9 p.m. on Wednesday, November 26th, when we can get to know our neighbors at a street party with local musicians and a police officer to discuss safety issues. There are measures we can take a little further down the beach, armed with briquettes. After gathering driftwood, we can warm ourselves and warm others through the smoke that with the wind off the desert will be driven toward Omnidawn, where many worked harder than we are doing now and died worse off than we are dying now. But every suffering is incomparable and unique to the woman knowing what the weather was wailing over the dead, and specific to the prisoner who knows that everything's misjudged, that's paraded through the universe behind men performing the cigar-smoking dance, or the one about stalking a panther or painter or women panting with invention, since when one invents, it is said that one's navel is attempting to leap off to another place with laughter, taking with it all the money it otherwise holds, hidden just inside the entrance to the belly of life revealed as the curtain that rises trails threads from its tattered hem over hams fat with layers of meaning, extravagantly and elegantly, but subversively and cruelly imitating contemporary personages whose self-appointed task is to piss on every erect iris, purple violet, tripartite trillium, and tongue of fern growing under the ancient trees, which, though binoculars may flatten them, provide bouncing habitats for nesting, shocking birds as the cumulonimbus clouds darken deeply overhead, forming pockets for all who have lovingly feared the light of day.
Un magnifique rongeur avec une pomme de terre dans la gueule vient précipitamment de traverser mon lit. Sa queue a effleuré ma joue. Je pense que c'est ce qui m'a réveillée. Maintenant, alertée par sa présence, je suis consciente qu'il y en a un autre également. Deux magnifiques rongeurs. Ils sont incandescents comme des éclats d'expérience. Ce sont des créateurs de réalité. Je ne peux juger de leur taille. Ils sont plus petits que des cochons, plus grands que des scarabées. Il est impossible d'entrer davantage en contact. C'est une chose dont je suis sûre. Le contact produit de l'incertitude. Mais il faut savoir que certaines personnes sont délirantes sans être malheureuses.
Lost after all. You can leave any time. This rat's like me. She has a human soul. Too late. Duty has become a habit. Habit, a duty. Poems, distilled from other poems, will probably pass away. But there's dance in the old dame yet. No doubt I have died myself 10,000 times before. Last poem. I am a failed fire chief. I am a failed thief. Didn't I fail at the wrong thing? Aren't I a failure at failure? Failure is inevitable. I am a fan of failure. I am a failure flailed by failure. I leap into failure. I relish the self-pity that's produced by the self-loathing that comes as a consequence of failure. The sauce has curdled, the meat is tough, the custard is runny, the meal is a failure. Failure is the offshoot of argument, but then failure occurs too from a lack of it. Moral failure, financial failure, social failure, heart failure, liver failure, failure to thrive. Failure is familiar. I'm faking failure. I'm reconciled to failure. Failure has a certain allure. I'm quick at failure. I'm clumsy at failure. It's said that girls are failed males. There's been many a worse failure. Failure clings like gum to the shoe. I set about forging failure. Fuck failure. I fit failure, or failure fits me. A guy fails and is pursued by that failure. One could succeed and thereby fail. Every painter fails. Every parent fails. I failed to dot an I. I failed by failing to tell a failure that he'd failed. Honesty fails. Dishonesty fails. The unprincipled fail without principle. The principled fail to excess. There are whole classes of failure, genres of failure. I'll risk failure. Courting favor, I'll court failure. I failed geology. I failed Greek. I failed to show up when expected on Wednesday. Memory fails. Flags fail. Luck fails. Hers snarl at the failed. Families bury the failed. Fail farther. Fail fatter. Fail in a particular field of endeavor. Failure is succinct and sucks sugar. Failure figures. I'm a failed detective, a failed botanist, a failed equestrian. I am a failed mariner. I am an errant failure. So this is what happens to failures. Failure. Thank you.